Hey, welcome to episode 118 of the Hangar Z Podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicasts. In this three-part series, we sit down with Matt Szluka. Matt's currently employed as a state trooper and fixed-wing aircraft pilot with the Illinois State Police in the Chicagoland area. Matt was born and raised in the Chicago area and has lived in the city his entire life. Prior to joining the Illinois State Police Air Operations Bureau as a pilot, Matt was assigned as a canine handler to the Illinois State Police Statewide Anti-Violence Enforcement Team and the District 15 Criminal Patrol Team. Outside of his law enforcement duties, Matt works part-time as an instructor at a local college, teaching aviation classes to aspiring pilots. Matt has 12 years of law enforcement experience at 3 different police departments in Chicago. Outside of being a pilot and canine handler, Matt has experience as a member of the Illinois State Police Chicago Region Crowd Control Team, as a canine instructor, a canine crowd control instructor, a field training officer, and evidence technician. Before Matt entered law enforcement, he was an airline captain at a large regional airline that serves cities across North America and the Bahamas. During his time in the airlines, Matt was a human factors facilitator and crew resource management instructor. Matt received a Bachelor of Science degree from the University of Illinois in Aviation Human Factors, which spurred his passion for human interaction with advanced technologies, particularly as it relates to aviation. Matt now focuses his efforts on supporting his fellow brothers and sisters on the ground, utilizing aircraft and other technologies for criminal enforcement, especially in the city of Chicago, a place he has proudly called home for 42 years. In the last part of this 3-part series, we continue talking about the importance of stats to maintain and grow your air support unit. Matt talks about the benefit of developing and maintaining positive relationships with the tower controllers that work in your area of operation. We discuss drone operations as a supplement and in conjunction with manned aviation programs. Matt and Jack, both having had backgrounds in canine operations, talk about the benefits of training with your canine teams. And lastly, we talk about some of the technologies that are being employed both airborne and ground-based that's increasing officer safety. Thank you to our sponsors, Garmin, Shotover, and CNC Technologies. Cheers.
Welcome to the Hangar Z Podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicasts. The Hangar Z Podcast is the first and only podcast dedicated to promoting and exploring the personnel and equipment behind the missions in public safety aviation. Join your host, John Gray, Jeff Ratkovich, and Jack Shanley.
Still southbound, skidding to a stop. Stand by here. Looks like you're getting ready to bail. Heads up, guys, bailing. Okay, the guy, he's running through the house, jumping the fence, threw the shotgun, threw something out. Grabbing the shotgun. Don't go over that fence. Don't go over that fence. Grab the shotgun again. He is armed. Stay there. Hold your position.
4 on the stop. You're in custody.
Good advising code 4 on the stop.
Jack, you guys kept track of everything. In fact, I think my agency, we monitored or we mirrored our stat keeping program off of what you guys did. You talk about some of the stats you kept and how you track that?
Yeah, it was part of the computerized log system, and it kept track of everything. I mean, every call you went to, how you were involved. You know, the narrative was important for arrests and things like that, but the stats themselves were important regularly when the bean counters come in and say, why do we need this helicopter, program? It costs a fortune. Well, yeah, it does, but we went to this many calls last year, and the biggest stat that I told people for years to keep is that we kept was there was an assist and responsible for. I mean, where you were the reason that guy gets taken into custody, that if you're not there, he doesn't get taken into custody. We kept very close track of that. And first at scene, that was another big one. If we were first at scene, and we were about 50% of the time, that was big because that will sometimes stop the activity. Somebody getting beaten on a street corner and you come overhead, most of the time they stop and run. Some didn't, but first at scene and responsible for were 2 really big stats. Oh, and observation. If you observed it, you initiated, self-initiated activity was a big deal because it just shows you're not up there you're not a flying club. You're doing police work, and that was really important. I mean, our motto was, only the vehicle has changed. Only the vehicle's changed. You're still street cops, and now you're in this. You happen to be in a multi-million-dollar piece of equipment that's flying at 1,000 feet now, but your job is a street cop. So if you see something, you do something about it, and you're proactive, and you're hustling and doing all the stuff that we've been talking about with Matt, and that's how we looked at it. So stats were really important, even for well-established units like LA's. We had to justify our existence regularly to get new equipment, to get more aircraft, to exist, because the bill was, it's a big bill, every year, just in fuel alone. it would shock people. Some new city council member gets there and sees that on the budget, and they faint. And go, do we really need that? Well, yeah, we do. Yeah, we do. And we were able to say why, because we had the stats to show it.
I think that's why us with Illinois State Police are getting the aircraft, because they were keeping very good statistics of what was going on. They were seeing how much they were getting, things that you normally would not get with our restricted pursuit policy, stolen vehicles that have multiple guns in them, right? Or stolen vehicles that were used in burglary of a motor vehicle, or burglary to a train car, and it goes to a house and then you get more out of it and things like that. Those are normally things that you wouldn't get without the aircraft. So that's why they're spending the money and getting grant money and things like that to get the new equipment, knowing that we really need it. So.
Wait, Matt, are you saying that stolen cars are used in other crimes? Oh my gosh!
Shockingly, yes.
Isn't it? I mean, you talk, the powers that be. It's just joyriding. It's a stolen car, and it's like, to any street cop, they steal cars for a lot of reasons. Are there joyriders? Yes. But most of them are stolen to do other stuff, like you're talking about.
What our experience is here is that the carjack cars are joyriders. They're 13-year-olds, they're 15-year-olds. They carjack a car and they drive it around for a while and then they get rid of it. But it's the stolen cars, especially the high-end ones. They keep them for a while, and they're pretty sophisticated criminal organizations that are using these for a lot of extensive crimes.
Exactly. That's a nationwide trend that a lot of people don't get. Because they don't know, because they're not street cops and they don't see it, like you're seeing it. That's great.
Going back to the podcast that we were on, the Street Cop Training podcast, the host is from New Jersey, and we talked about, or asked why folks aren't utilizing law enforcement aviation in that part of the country. And he didn't really have an answer, but it'll be interesting to see going forward how your guys' success might start to influence some of these agencies, in that area, to start adopting police aviation assets and going that direction. Because like you're saying, with the implementation of technology and all the different things that we can do now, it's making the job more efficient and safer for not just the officers in the street, but the citizens in the general public. So that's huge.
Yeah, for sure. And one of the things too, we're talking about stats and budgets, and as you said, Jack, the bean counters, right? Yeah. But one of the things that's hard to track is what we stop that doesn't result in money being spent. So what I mean by that is, how many pursuits did we assist on where the units were able to back off and therefore stopped having a crash that might have injured somebody and then had a payout, right? Some of these settlements, it could be $10 million, $15 million. If you have one $15 million settlement, we paid $3.5 million for a well-equipped Cessna 206, right? How many airplanes can you buy, with that $15 million that you have to pay out to a family because of a bad pursuit, right? And those are things that you don't really get to. They're not written down because you don't know if a crash would have happened or not. So that's what I think some of these other states need to realize, is that some of these bad things that go sideways, and same with use of force too. We'll talk about stuff with canine use later. How many use of force incidents can we avoid by having better tactics, utilizing the aircraft and the intelligence that we provide to make things safer for the guys on the ground, and therefore have a non-use of force incident when otherwise force may have been used with our puppies that go find guys in the bushes, right? Jack, you were saying the surprise finds, right? The surprise bites and things like that. Yep. When you come upon people, those are things that you really can't track through any kind of statistical tracking.
Exactly.
Yeah. When I think about some of the environmental concerns you guys have in your area, I wonder if that's maybe some of the influence as to why, law enforcement hasn't had a big aviation presence. For you guys, I know, Chicago obviously is unique because it's a big urban city. You've got the airport infrastructure there, so you've got some airspace considerations. But as far as the weather and the topography and those other considerations when it comes into flying in that part of the country, what are you seeing there?
What I'm seeing is winter's hard, right? So icing conditions, fixed wing aircraft, we fly at higher altitudes. So because we operate in the Chicago O'Hare Class B airspace, the Class Bravo airspace, and then we have Midway as well, what they normally do is they wedge us between Midway traffic and O'Hare traffic. So we typically fly at 5,500 feet, 4,500 feet. And so O'Hare departures and arrivals are flying over top of us. And then Midway departures are leveling off below us. At 4,000 feet or something like that. So sometimes these jets are getting really close to us, 500 feet separation where we're flying. So you got to be very precise with your altitude control when we're on these incidents. So Not to pat ourselves on the back, but we fly these airplanes pretty meticulously when we're on these incidents, because you got to be very close on your altitudes, just in the airline traffic. But because we're at those altitudes of 4,500, 5,500 feet, those winter low overcast days where it's 2,000 overcast and it's otherwise a nice day, it's 40 degrees, but it's overcast. Last winter, that grounded us quite a bit because we just couldn't fly low altitude. It's too hard for us to fly below, let's say, like 3,500 feet, 3,000 feet, doing these pursuit doing the pursuits and managing the pursuits at the lower altitudes. So that's kind of one of those things where the helicopter gets an advantage, right? So the helicopter units that are up here were able to fly and we weren't. And that was just, disheartening, because you want to be out there, right? We want to be out there supporting these guys. We want to fly. It's not that we don't want to fly. It's just we can't due to the weather. So it's a close proximity to Lake Michigan. It causes that lake stuff. So downstate, these guys are flying all the time because it's clear downstate, but we're socked in. So
what's your relationship like with Midway and O'Hare? Do you have a good working relationship with their tower and their approach control folks? But they treat you good and take care of you?
Yeah, they're fantastic. So there's us, there's federal agencies, there's Chicago police. We have a great working relationship. We've actually gone over and taken tours of the approach control facility and just talked about some things, and we, brought some cake to make it a little, you got to smooth a little bit, right?
Cookies and cake and pie,
But what really helped our relationship is they're getting hammered with these laser incidents, and we were able to get a guy in custody with the laser one time. So now I think they realize that we're not just up there just flying circles and interrupting airspace. There's like a value in what we're providing. And a lot of these controllers might live in the city, and we'll tell them, yeah, sorry, we got to go north right now because we're following our armed robbery crew up in the northwest side. And they're like, hey, I live in the northwest side. Yeah, go ahead. So they know. But they also have to answer to the airlines and the FAA, right? Sure. So if they can't let us in, they can't let us in, and we don't make a hard time about it. We just say, okay, it's no problem. So
that's a good relationship.
Just what it is. Yeah.
That's a good relationship. Not everybody has that.
No,
that's good.
And they're great. I mean, all the controllers are great. So they do a really good job here in Chicago. So.
Good to hear.
Yeah. For the agencies that aren't fostering those relationships, I really encourage you to do that. I've had a lot of circumstances, and I know the two of you have as well, where you probably would have gotten kicked out of a portion of your airspace because of arriving traffic or departing traffic. But because we had fostered those relationships and they knew how professional we were, and Matt, you talked about adhering to your altitudes, they knew they could put us in a specific spot, or they could divert traffic if they had to, or they could put us above the traffic as it's coming in. They could do a bunch of things because of the relationship we had in place, to the professionalism that we had just exhibited over the years. They knew we were going to do what we said we were going to do. So they would make exceptions and put us in a position where we needed to be. Had those relationships not been fostered, we may not have had that, and we've talked about it quite a bit, but I'll talk about it again real quick. LAPD has an event every year where they fly basically all the Southern California controllers in, and it's an appreciation event. It's also a disaster preparedness event, and it's timely. We're going to do an episode just on this. And you talk about what's happening globally right now, the current events. There's a high chance that something's going to happen, maybe not in the US, but worldwide, where we're going to have to utilize public safety aviation to evacuate a massive amount of people that have been injured in a terrorist attack or something else. So LAPD is proactively taking in, the opportunity to train and do that. And so this event that they're doing, it's cool because, we fly in the controllers, and then you get, one-on-one time with those controllers as you're doing that flight. You get to sit down and break some bread with them a little bit, and then you fly them back. And it's just a really cool way to kind of foster that relationship. So really give you guys kudos, Jack, at LAPD for developing that program.
Well, they were doing that long before I ever got there. And I just reaped the benefits of that. And there's many times where I said, thank God for the chili flying, because they should be kicking me out of here right now, and are moving me instead of moving Southwest Airlines on final. And they move Southwest Airlines on final because they know what we're doing and our relationship. And we took that very seriously, by the way. Like Matt said, they expect something out of you, and they get it. They know that you're professional, and they know that if you say, I'm going to stay here, I'm going to stay there. And once you get that reputation, they can trust you, and they're going to let you get within that 500 feet. that's a good thing because we got to get our mission done. Sometimes you have to be there, but in the big scheme of things, as far as a tower is concerned, they don't care about robbery suspects. They care about air safety,
Right.
And it's low on their priority. But if they can trust you, you can stay there. And it's just it's so good. I was so glad to hear your answer on that, Matt. And being proactive about it is important.
Yeah, I got to give them a lot of kudos too, because about a month and a half ago, we had a serious incident, pursuit that ended in a manhunt in a suburban residential area, armed offenders and things like that. We called them up and told them it was a serious incident. We need to get overhead. And we were in close proximity to midway departures, and they actually restricted the departures to 2,500 feet because we were at 3,500 just to keep them from getting resolution advisories, RAs. And I mean, that's tough on a 737, 800 coming out of midway to level off 1,800 feet AGL. I mean, that's a quick level off, but I really appreciated for about an hour and a half as we were overhead looking for those suspects on the ground that they did that for us, because those guys on the ground really needed it at that point. So
one of the oddest memories I have is working in surveillance over downtown LA up at 5,000 feet. And you've got the arrivals from LAX coming in from over the ocean, headed right at you. It's just the weirdest feeling, to be at eye level with these guys. And then, they're being controlled by SoCal, and SoCal's putting them below you or above you or whatever the thing is. But yeah, that was a weird feeling, like you're saying, just being so close to them. Going back to you and your agency, you talk about the success and where that might influence other agencies in your area to adopt these programs. Where do you see your agency going as you go forward in terms of aviation and whatnot?
Thank you to our sponsor, Garmin. Be ready for the most challenging missions with the Garmin G500H TXI Avionics Suite. Get terrain and power line awareness, plus optional 3D synthetic vision and NVG compatibility with industry-leading product support. Details at Garmin.com.
I think only good places. On a personal note, I hope it continues to grow because of the value we provide to the troopers on the ground and other agencies on the ground. I'd like to see it grow. I'd like to see too, I don't want to put ourselves out of work, but I also like to see other agencies, if they can afford it, investigate aviation, because we have limited resources and limited personnel. And if, the various sheriff's departments or larger municipalities, I'd love to see Chicago get more helicopters to support, have them be a bit like LAPD, where you have 24-hour helicopter coverage, or one north, one south, so that one helicopter is not running all over the place. They can be on scene faster. So I hope it grows. Again, it's just, I think it comes down to staffing, funding, and just finding qualified personnel, which is a struggle for every law enforcement agency right now. So
yeah. One of the last questions on that would be about drone integration. Do you guys currently integrate with drones, or what does that look like for you guys?
So we're starting to in our own agency. A lot of suburban agencies outside of Chicago. I don't think Chicago Police has drones or has implemented them at all, but a lot of suburban agencies have. And some canine training we did recently, we had a couple drone operators out there, and one of our drones that we have, which is one of the larger DJI drones that has the FLIR camera. And those things are super capable. I mean, they're very capable. They have their limitations. I know people always worry that it's going to be a replacement for airborne law enforcement. I don't think it'll be that way for decades. Never. Maybe never. The two coincide well, though. Like I was talking about in the pre-brief with the drone operators, is that they could do things at below 400 feet AGL, their limited altitude, to help us investigate heat signature that we maybe can't. So in my mind, on an incident management, utilizing the drone, whereas if we see heat from 5,500 feet and we can't tell if it's an individual or not, get that drone in real tight and close and see if they can get a better better resolution image of that to investigate whether it's somebody or not before you send ground personnel trudging through mud and trees and everything like that to go investigate. Because those guys on the ground get tired easily, right? They don't want to be trudging all over the place. I've been there with the canine hunter, Jack, you have too. You don't want to be trudging around getting exhausted chasing every heat signature. So if the aircraft can direct the drone into that heat and pre-investigate it to see if it's worthwhile for the ground to investigate, that's a tremendous tool in my mind. And then those days when it's low overcast, if we're not out there, the drone's a tremendous tool. I mean, you can't do a pursuit management, but it can do a manhunt. It can go out there with the canine team and walk behind them at a good distance and follow them along and do a pre-clear. and try to clear in front of where that dog's tracking for any heat, try to see if they can locate somebody. So I'm all for the drones. I'm a big drone guy, but
yeah, I am too. I think it's a great supplement to what we're doing. It can do things that we can't, and we can do things it can't. So when it comes to the aviation tool belt, it's just one more tool that we'll have at our disposal to do the job efficiently for the customers on the ground and the citizen we're protecting, So I'm a big advocate of it. I know there's still a little bit of reluctance in our community for people to, I guess, accept it as one of those tools in the tool belt. But I think over time, it'll prove itself to be a worthwhile and worthy tool for us to utilize.
I agree. I'm with you, both of you on that. I think it's great. And that what you just described, Matt, with the high end and the low end of a FLIR search for a manhunt in Pennsylvania, that's what they did on that big manhunt that they had the escapee. Every canine team that was out there had a drone, but they also had multiple aircraft with great capabilities overhead. And that's exactly what they were doing. They were using the overhead to get, something. And if it wasn't detailed enough, each team had a drone that they could go in and pinpoint and get a really close look at something. That's exactly how they were using it. And it worked effectively. I talked to a canine handler that was on that search, and he said if it weren't for the air assets, both drone and up higher, much of that search couldn't have been done. It was so thick. He was carrying his dog through much of it. But he said that the drone and high up helicopters or fixed wings were a great combo, and they were the saving grace of that search.
I did a rural manhunt training class with my dog many years ago with this guy, Rob Trevino. He's a former Army, Delta Force guy. He owned a company that did tactics and training and stuff. And I went out with the SWAT team. Somebody had to cancel. So one of the SWAT commanders was like, "You want to go with your dog?" I was like, "Sure, I would try it." But it was just that I had at some points we're wading through waist deep water in this manhunt training. And I have my dog on my shoulders. And I said, "Can you imagine if you're sending that dog team wading through water to go investigate some heat, and it comes out, it's like a tire, that's just a bunch of heat, they're going to be pissed."
Really pissed.
Yeah. So the drone would be super helpful to just fly over that water, go over there, check it out, and be like, "Nah, it's a tire."
One thing that's interesting with a lot of the conversations we've had on the podcast is finding out and realizing how many successful TFOs that do a really good job were canine handlers prior to going to aviation. And the two of you are both examples of that. Jack and I were talking offline a few weeks back about doing a podcast episode talking about canine to air support operations. While this conversation, I don't want to be that, but I do want to talk about some of the training that Matt, you talked about something you guys recently implemented and what that looks like. But I think for this part of the conversation, I'll hand the controls over to Jack, and really interested to see how you guys are utilizing your training and some of the tools you have airborne wise to assist those canine teams. So Jack, you got the controls.
I have the controls, John. Positive transfer.
Yeah.
The training that you talked about really interested me because it involved everything. And so tell us about that particular training day. Who coordinated it? Who initiated it? Why they initiated it, and what you guys did, what you tried to accomplish on that training.
The training group that I train with is some really fantastic individuals that are in that training group and run that training group to try to do some advanced training. And one of my friends called me and he said, I want to take the dogs up in the plane because I want to expose them to the plane. And I was like, no. And he's like, they'll be muzzled. And I was like, the muzzle's got a steel plate. And if that dog hits me in the back of the head and knocks me unconscious, you're going to be fighting with your dog and trying to learn how to fly in about 5 seconds. All right. So I said, we're not doing that. And I said, but we can do a training together. Let's do a training together. I think that we can supplement each other. We'll go up in the plane and we'll do some tracking scenarios. So I did a PowerPoint that I had done for some internal training with the state police. And Jack, I have your book, and I referenced some things in that about perimeter containment and things like that in the book, in this class I put on about utilizing LPRs combined with canine and air. So we did some presentation on it. We talked about a scenario. And what I like doing with it is instead of just wildly searching and creating a search pattern with the camera as a TFO, and then having the dog team go work independently to see what they find, I said, I'm going to follow that dog team and trust the dog knows what they're doing. I'm going to pre-clear for the dog to start looking for some areas of heat so that if I do see something, they can better tactically position themselves to do a surround and call out type scenario. So the scenario we set up was that we were going to do a track. We lay a track with a find at the end. There's an individual in the bite suit. Okay. And along the way, we threw some clothing, like they took their shirt off and threw it in a tree, which would retain some heat, and you might be able to see it, right? So the team had to go out and do a track with cover officers, and we had the drones overhead to get some practice for them. We didn't go in the plane because it was low overcast and raining, so I simulated it with a microphone, which actually worked out well because I could give some one-on-one instruction. But we had the team go out, and I was calling out heat. I said, hey, I'm pre-clearing for you. I see some heat in those bushes over here. And they were supposed to set up, give some announcements. The first heat was a discarded sweatshirt. It was retaining heat, and they were supposed to set up, get no answer, send the dog in, nothing, fine. Okay, we got evidence. We're on the right track. Continue going along. Hey, I'm getting another heat in these bushes by a cornfield. They're supposed to set up, do surround and call out. And the goal was that they were going to set up tactically behind cover or some kind of concealment, start making verbal announcements with the dog barking, and then have the suspect come out with their hands up and say, all right, you guys found me, I surrender, and then give up, be taken into custody. And Jack, you know about the bite suit, like the fireman you talked about earlier. It's a high value item, right? So at the end of it, this is an armed carjacking suspect. Now we need to calm the dog down, redirect them, and go find the gun. Okay. And they call it in the canine world drive capping, where they have high drive, bring them back down to low drive and work meticulously. Right. And that's a very realistic scenario of a dog deployment in the field. So
extremely realistic.
Yeah. So that's what we went out to try to do, is just teach these guys, hey, we're going to lean on you and trust your dog, that your dog knows where they're going. So because a canine handler, I trust you. When I call out heat, you trust me, and you set up instead of diving in there and getting shot or getting an inadvertent apprehension or whatever. You trust me and you set up and make call outs. So it's a good practice of how we lean on each other. Back to that CRM stuff, right? Talking about crew resource management and working together as a team. So that was the goal of that, is just trying to make it safer for the canine teams leaning on the air asset to kind of pre-clear areas for them.
Thank you to our sponsor, Shotover. Shotover Systems is the leading developer and manufacturer of high-performance gyro-stabilized cameras with advanced real-time AR mapping and mission management, all backed by unparalleled custom training and support. Now offering the M2 multi-sensor system, sole 6-axis EO/IR platform with 4K Ultra HD color and infrared technology. Ideal for law enforcement and defense. Offered with real-time AR overlays to quickly identify streets, weather, and traffic. Automated license plate recognition, 24-megapixel digital photographs, and automated steering and tracking.
So valuable. And I love that you threw in the shirt and threw in things that maybe aren't the bad guy. And because what you accomplished there, and I know you know this, is that the canines are learning about FLIR. Mm-hmm. You're learning about the canines. You already know it, but most CFOs don't.
Right.
The air crews are learning more about the dogs. Dogs are more learning about aviation. Mm-hmm. And it becomes this very tight-knit blend, and it's hard to beat. From a criminal point of view, it's hard to beat both of those. Is it possible to get away from a FLIR? Yes. Is it possible to avoid a canine? Yes. Is it possible to avoid both of them working together as a team? Very difficult.
Yeah.
Very difficult. And that's what's so valuable about that. I loved when I saw that you were doing that, because many agencies don't. I've never understood it, because I've always preached it, saying, you should know your canine people on a first name basis, and they should know yours, because you work with them so often. And if you're not on the same page of music, you're spinning your wheels a little bit. So great job getting that going and doing it. I mean, that's going to benefit everyone.
We got to go out and practice together, because the first time doing it shouldn't be when you're looking for a guy who just shot 2 people, right? Like you should have this down pat. So
exactly. And you've seen the videos. We all have people that say, on the FLIR, and say, "Oh, I think I've got your target here. Yeah, keep coming. He's 20 yards ahead of you. 10 yards, 10 feet, 9, 8. It's like, it drives me crazy. It drives me crazy, because that's not tactical. That's suicidal. And it teaches by having that training, you're showing them, hey, I'm going to tell you where I have this heat, and you're going to treat that heat with respect. And then you're going to, surround and call out, like you said, as opposed to walking them right in on it. That's a great training day.
And in the pre-briefing area, I have a video from one of my incidents, and it's exactly what you're talking about. We're trying to walk these guys in. I was trying to walk in some Chicago officers to an incident that was a joint state police and Chicago incident. It was a carjacking pursuit. Driver fled, jumped a fence, went up on some train tracks, and then went down into brush. And these guys went in there with flashlights, kind of giving their position away. And I'm watching them, and I'm trying to tell them, you're danger close to this guy right now. Yeah. One of the officers tripped and fell like 4 feet away from the guy hunkered down in the bushes. And then they kept going and passed him. And they went up and they kind of regrouped, and then they came down. But they literally did not find this guy until they stepped on him because he was so well concealed. And I could see it the whole time. And when the guy fell, my heart literally skipped a beat. Like I was like, because I thought there were scream shots fired, because I thought he went down like he got shot. Because I was like, oh my God, he just fortunately tripped and kept going. But it's just it's hard to see because you're in the airplane, you just want to yell out like stop, So
oh my gosh,
yeah.
You yelled in the cockpit, and your partner goes, "Hey,
yeah.
I've done that. What are you guys doing? Stop,
Yeah.
But training and front loading that, making it realistic to what you are going out on a nightly basis is just, it's going to prevent those bad things from happening once enough people get trained. And it's in a metropolitan area like Chicago or LA or any of these big cities, it's you're never going to get to train everybody. But if you can train those core groups that are out there, the canine people, the SWAT people, the statewide anti-violence enforcement team people, the people that are getting involved in all this, if you can train them in how to work together with an aircrew with FLIR on a manhunt, boy, that's valuable. And you're saving lives in the long run. Yeah. You may never know it, but you are.
Right. And talking about the stats, circling back to it, if you have an inadvertent apprehension on a suspect that could have surrendered, now are you talking about a payout to a potential offender in a lawsuit situation there? So, and that's one of those things that you can't really measure at that point. So
you can't. Yeah. You can't. That's great stuff. Very proactive and very professional. And like I said, it was really interesting to see that, and it made me happy because there's not a lot of that goes on anywhere. The last time I've done it a couple times with UAS people, with the drone folks, but the last time I was involved with a canine thing was in Cook County. It was at you're going to know where this is. It's an old mental institution that's abandoned with a huge water tower. You know what I'm talking about?
Yep.
We did a canine search scenario there with Cook County Air. They brought their Long Ranger out, and it was so valuable. Yeah. I mean, we tried to make it as realistic as we could. It was a great facility for that. I mean, this huge area. I mean, acres and acres of abandoned buildings. Some of them are freaking spooky, I mean, they really wild stuff. I mean, you've been there.
I've been there. I actually have a scar on my arm right here. You can't see it, but I was a role player for some Navy SEAL teams that came in and did training there.
Oh, yeah.
And they were like, hey, do you want to be a role player? And I was like, sure. And they shot me up pretty good. I had a permanent scar from a SEAL team in those buildings. So,
well, that's funny you say that, because the day that I was there were some guys there scouting, and I looked up and I recognized one of them, and he was the air ops guy for SEAL Team 6, who I knew from previous contacts, and they were coming there like a month later.
Well, maybe it was that team, because it was supposedly, per one of the other role players that was involved, she said it was SEAL Team 6. They wouldn't tell us who they work for, so it was probably SEAL Team 6.
Sure it was.
So
but they were coming, they were scouting, and I remember talking to him for like 20 minutes, and he goes, "This place is gold." And I'm like, "Oh, you ain't kidding." I mean, it's huge. It's like a little town almost, with structures and housing and open fields, and which brings us around to something that you said earlier. On that training day, the Cook County Bloodhound guys did a demo that I was fascinated by. And you mentioned earlier that if you could go work a Bloodhound, you'd love to do that. Tell us more about that. Why do you say that, Matt?
Well, I love tracking. I told you that's my favorite discipline, because when you go out with a team and there's nothing there, like there's a shirt on the ground, or I've done a track off a car seat where I opened the driver's door, had the dog jump in, tell them "sook," and they start tracking. We found a suicidal woman in a state park that way in the car, and it's super cool. Like, to all the officers there, like, how did you find that? It's invisible. It's an invisible scent. That dog's nose is incredible to be able to pick it up and decipher all the different scents out there, to to be able to find that. And the bloodhounds are even better at it. Like we had 1 to 2 hours, maybe probably less than that with the apprehension, the dual purpose dogs. But these bloodhounds, I've seen it upwards of like 24 hours later that they're able to locate that scent. And especially missing persons or missing children and things like that. And now you're not worried about that dog coming and finding that kid sleeping behind a log and biting them,
right?
Because it's a floppy-eared bloodhound. I think that would be awesome because I just love going out in the woods and getting dirty and going and finding people. So that's a cool job. And
it is.
I've trained with Cook a lot. I'm friends with a lot of those guys. They got a lot of bloodhounds. They're really good dogs. And we've done a lot of stuff with them too, where we have the apprehension dog in formation behind the bloodhound.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's what they demonstrated that day. And I'd never seen that before because I was always of the opinion, well, bloodhounds on an armed search, they don't go together in my world from my limited knowledge on it. And then I saw that and went, aha, that's how you can do it. Because, like you said, a bloodhound, isn't going to defend you from a guy with a gun, whereas a Malinois probably will.
Yeah.
But they did it in combo, very tactically, very smartly. They practice it. I'm not surprised that those guys and you worked with them because they had a great success rate too. They told me some of the incidents they were involved in, and I was fascinated. It was fantastic, the success rate they had.
Yeah, that's a really good group. I love training with those guys. So I still keep in touch with them, even though I'm not canine anymore. My vet, she specializes in military and police working dogs. She made the comment the other day that some people leave canine and they just disappear. You never see them again. And you keep showing up these canine events. I was like, because I just love dogs. Like I can't help it. Like, this is still my thing. So.
Well, good. That's a professional crew. I was very impressed with them. And like I said, I got to see firsthand how it works. And I would have never thought of that, using that bloodhound that way, but really effective.
Yeah.
Now you add the aviation unit to that, working together with that crew. Oh my gosh, gold.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Not many people are going to get away with that team, the joint team out there.
No, I agree.
Yeah. One of the things that we were doing in my agency, the southern part of my city, a lot of new developments down there. A lot of new housing tracts were being built in the last, 10 years or so, or maybe longer. So we'd get new TFOs and we'd get new canine operators, and we'd put together some training that was beneficial for both. So we'd have a decoy go hide in the housing tract that's new, and there's all kinds of places to hide in there. So you'd have the new canine operators, as well as the seasoned ones in there, and then you'd have the new TFO, and their mission was to work together and find the guy. So it was really cool to use that as a training tool, and it was just super effective. So kind of like what you're saying, just I guess in an urban environment, having the teams work together. And that's the key, is just like you said, you don't want the first time doing something to be the first time you're doing something.
Thank you to our sponsor, CNC Technologies. CNC Technologies, serving law enforcement, government, and military markets with tailored mission solutions, system training, and live 24/7 support with CNC.live platform. Explore more at cnctechnologies.com.
That's right. And what I found on the UAS side of things, where I've been invited to come provide some training, is that I tell them up front, I'm not a drone operator, but what I can do is teach you about air to ground, ground to air communication, and FLIR searching and search techniques. And many departments, they just say, well, we have 7 drone operators. They're all certified. They're good to go. And I say, well, are they? I mean, there's a lot more to it than meets the eye. Just like the TFO job, they are basically a pilot and TFO at the same time operating that drone. And they better know how to talk, and they better know how to search, and they better know what to do and what not to do, just like we've all learned the hard way, because they're involved in the same stuff, the manhunts and high-risk stuff. They got to know what they're saying.
I teach at a college part-time, unrelated to law enforcement. I teach aviation to private pilots and stuff, but there's a Homeland Security program and a law enforcement training program in basically the same building that I teach in, and they do drone classes there. And we just had that discussion about developing advanced classes in like thermography and utilizing FLIR. So not just teaching you part 107 and teaching you about how to get certified to fly the drone and how to operate it, but how to utilize it as a manhunting tool, right? And how to understanding what you're seeing in the image with the FLIR, the stuff we learn as a TFO, and doing that and creating not only a drone pilot, but then creating a drone TFO out of them as well. So I think that's going to be important moving forward in unmanned stuff. Yeah.
It has to be because, I mean, I know my son growing up, he could be 10 years old and I could teach him to fly that thing. But could I teach him how to interpret a FLIR image or how to tactically deploy people? No. So I tell people, you can teach a 10-year-old to fly it, but do you know what to do with it and what to say and not to say? Exactly what you just described. It's good that that's being discussed because that's an important element. The drone flying's become fairly simple. I mean, the drones they're more sophisticated. They almost fly themselves. They can fly themselves in many times, depending on the model and everything. But can you provide that TFO type service that we're accustomed to? Yeah. That's the test.
Have the confidence in the image you're seeing and the confidence to speak up what you're seeing and alert the ground units to it. And
in manned aviation, we've learned all the lessons, through experience, mistakes, and everything else when it comes to thermography and utilizing the camera systems. So I think it's important for us to teach these lessons to the folks that are operating the drone systems. They don't need to relearn these lessons. We've already learned them. We just need to make an effort to make them more efficient to where they don't have to, learn them on their own. So I encourage folks, just like we encourage TFOs, if you're a new drone operator, watch YouTube videos of infrared searches, sign up for tactical flying courses, the thermography courses. You don't even have to go to a physical place. You can do their training courses, their thermography courses from your hangar. But, basically take the training that's available to TFOs because it's applicable to you. Like Jack said, you need to be proficient in your ability, not just to see the drone and use the camera, but to communicate to the folks on the ground what needs to be told. That's a skill all by itself. So yeah, highly recommend folks take that training and learn the lessons that we've already learned over the course of the years, through that. So just my 2 cents there. Last thing, I guess, since we're on the topic of technology and dogs and everything else, you talked about some of the technology you guys implemented in that training system, or not training system, but training course. Can you talk about some of that, the IR laser and the IR tags and whatnot?
Yeah. So I've been pushing, Jack, actually, you talked about ITOA earlier, doing the ITOA training and stuff like that. The first time I ever got exposed to this equipment was at an ITOA conference, and seeing it was a handheld night vision monocular and a handheld FLIR monocular, which were dual mounted to a ballistic helmet. And I said, that would be amazing technology as a canine handler to have. So I'm not going out there with a flashlight and giving my position away if I'm hunting somebody with a firearm in the woods, right? So I pushed really hard for probably 2 years, and my district finally relented, probably after me bugging them for a while about it, but bought me both those items of equipment to deploy in the field with the dog, was the night vision and then the FLIR. And I purchased a ballistic helmet because I said, if I'm going to be going out in the woods looking for somebody armed, I'd like to protect my noggin, right? I don't want to take one right to the dome and then be done for, because that's a problem, right? So I got the ballistic helmet and I was going to mount it, but then transitioned to air. So I handed those off to other people on the ground so that they could use the technology instead. But what I liked from it is having been on the ground and seeing the IR laser in action from the aircraft pointing on to the ground. That thing looks like Star Wars, and it points out position immediately, right? And then using it from the air too, where the pilot can now see where the TFO is pointing directly to something in a field, knowing how to position around it when it's just pitch black down there, right? So kind of everybody having it. But for the handler going out in the field with night vision, now they don't need to backlight themselves with a flashlight, and they're not giving their position away. So talking about the training we were doing earlier, where we set ourselves up behind cover or concealment to do a surround and call out, it really gets in that suspect's OODA loop if they don't know where you are. All they hear is people yelling and giving commands and a dog barking, and it echoes in the woods or echoes in a field, and they hear a helicopter overhead, and they know that everybody sees them, but they can't see anything, right? And then as a TFO, if I just say he's hiding in the ditch line right here, I'm going to illuminate and then boom, hit him with the IR laser. Now that canine handler knows exactly where to direct that dog, because they probably won't even see him if they're ideally not right on that person who's probably hiding behind a log or in a ditch line or something like that, because they're not going to be able to see him on night vision, but they'll sure see that laser there, right? Yeah. And then during the daytime, the same thing. We did some training stuff independently of the aircraft, but in canine training, utilizing the handheld FLIR in a dry marsh that had reeds and stuff. And one of us walked 10 yards into the marsh and was completely concealed, and you couldn't see, in uniform. We weren't even camouflaged. We were just in uniform, and you were completely invisible. And then that handheld flare up, and boom, you could see a complete outline of the person, see every movement they were making, everything. So I'm kind of pushing that technology and hoping that is something that grows for the canine handlers, or maybe is deployed on certain personnel in the field when they're working in conjunction with air. So like I said, you can get the jump on a suspect that's hiding out there in the field, utilizing air to locate on FLIR, IR laser designate where they are, send the crew into the dot or the laser point, let the canine team set up tactically, because you're going to have more successful no-bite apprehensions that way, utilizing the technology in that fashion, than you will just marching out there with a flashlight and then boom, you're on a bite. You got flashlights, you're not seeing very well, you can't see their hands, any of that stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah, because it's scary going out there. It
is.
Been there. It's scary going out in the woods in the dark with a flashlight only. Yeah. You're just waiting to hear a round go off. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, Border Patrol's been using that technique for years with, there are people on the ground, whether they're on ATVs or horseback or on foot. They've got night vision. The bird up ahead has the IR, and they point to groups and say, here, I got a group of 20 in these bushes. And, they surprise the heck out of them because, like you said, that suspect is now hearing commands and going, hold it. How do they see me? There's no flashlights. There's no nothing, but they do see him, and they know exactly where he is because of that technology. It's one of the best officer safety tools and techniques that you could possibly ask for the air, ground, especially canine way of getting things done and apprehending people. It's a great technique. I hope it expands for you.
Yeah,
it's it's worth it.
Yeah, I'd like to see that expand around the country. If aviation grows, I'd like to see that grow just along with it, right? And it's, again, one that we've talked about before. It's one of those financial intangibles where we don't know how much money we're actually saving in lawsuits for inadvertent bites, or officers injured in the job because they had a fight in the woods now, or possibly got shot, officer involved shooting type things. Those are things that we're not going to measure on a statistical sheet. So when you try to justify the cost, but I justified the cost by just saying, how much is our life worth when we're going out there, right?
That's right.
Those two items together cost $5,000. That's kind of a drop in the bucket when you talk about how big some of these budgets are in departments, right? I think it's an invaluable tool to be going out there, do this job safely.
Another tool that I saw in one of the trainings that we were part of was the canine handler, and the canine itself had IR strobes on, and they use those as they search for the suspect, so we could look out the windows, TFOs, and get an idea where they were when we're not on the camera itself. That was really helpful. Are you guys utilizing that when you're doing your searches?
Some people have that, but we don't utilize the night vision quite a bit because in the city particularly, it's hard to do it. I know some guys that work downstate in the rural areas will do it, and those guys will employ night vision, things like that sometimes. It's something I'd like to see grow. But with that too, I'm pushing for thermal identification, whether it's a thermal back patch on a vest carrier or your heavy vest carrier helmet to do a thermal patch. I know some companies make those, I'm not going to endorse any, but there are companies out there. And then the thermal numbers on top of the squads, that's a big one because we'll have somebody get behind a car and they're like, hey, I'm northbound here. And, I'm trying to locate them on FLIR, but, all the cars kind of blend in. And then the car's like an unmarked slick top. And it's like, which one are you? And they're like, we're in this lane. We just entered this bridge, whatever. I just want to point the direction in there, see the numerical, the numbers of the car number on the top through the thermal numbers that are affixed to the top of it. And I go, oh, I know exactly where you're at right there. And then differentiating officers on the ground when you're in FLIR mode to have a thermal back panel. I know if I see a big black line across their back, that's a cop, right? Because they have a thermal back patch on or something like that, because we can't see the IR flashers typically in the FLIR because it's thermal at that point without the night vision. So that's a difference for us being the fixed wing because we're so high compared to a lot of you guys in the helos, which might be lower and be employing NVGs.
Well, I think one of the more embarrassing parts of my career was a vehicle pursuit that went to a foot pursuit in a really dark area. And suspects get out, and of course there's 4 of them, and we're trying to keep track of 4 suspects in a dark field that are running. I'm using the light, like every tool that I have, and I end up calling out one of the suspects, his direction to travel. Like it's a male, all black, northbound through this lot, while I'm putting out the DOT of an officer who's chasing nobody.
Yeah.
But had the technology you're talking about been in place, and I was using NVGs or even the camera, that would have eliminated my need to be embarrassed.
Right. Well, I haven't had that for that, but I've had a couple squad cars I've followed, especially slick tops. I'm like, there's a car that just fled westbound and there's a cop going after it. And I'm like, hey, I got him. I'm going to start calling him out. He's like, wait a minute. I think you're calling me out. I'm like, all right, I don't have him. So.
Well, Matt, it's been a lot of fun to talk to you and pick your brain on the program that you guys have and how you guys are employing the technology you have. Really, really impressive. And like Jack said, it gives you kind of a glimmer of hope for where we're going as a country and as not an agency, but as a industry, being able to chase bad guys and utilize technology to make it safer for everybody. We'll have to have you back to talk, more in depth on the canine conversation. That's a conversation that we want to have and continue to promote, because it is, like Jack said, when you combine the aviation assets with the canines and all the technology that surrounds that, I think it gives us a huge advantage. Thank you again for all you're doing. Thanks for joining us. Jack, anything in closing before we sign off?
Thanks for joining us. What a great guest. I learned a lot. I mean, it really does pump me up and go, wow, it's great to hear that you guys are working so hard and using creative ways and technology, but it comes down to people. It still comes down to humans like you that initiate it and push it, and that you're being assertive about it and getting things done. And I can tell, you're the type of person that's going to get things done. Just keep doing what you're doing, Matt. It's very impressive, and it was great having you.
Thanks. I really appreciate you guys having me on the show. It was awesome talking to you guys as well. So, like I said, I feel pretty humbled to be on your show because you guys have had a lot of really fantastic guests, but it was my distinct pleasure to talk to you both. It was an awesome subject. It was a really good conversation. So we'll do it, like I said, at AppsCon over some actual drinks of the day next time. So.
It's a deal.
Yeah. All right, gentlemen. Well, you guys have a good day and a good night, and we'll catch you later.
Sounds good. We'll see you guys.
All right.
Take care.
Cheers. This is the end of part 3. Stand by for some insight on upcoming episodes after a word from our sponsors.
Thank you to our sponsor, Garmin. Be ready for the most challenging missions with the Garmin G500H TXI Avionics Suite. Get terrain and power line awareness, plus optional 3D synthetic vision and NVG compatibility with industry-leading product support. Details at Garmin.com. Thank you to our sponsor, Shotover. Shotover Systems is the leading developer and manufacturer of high-performance gyro-stabilized cameras with advanced real-time AR mapping and mission management, all backed by unparalleled custom training and support. Now offering the M2 multi-sensor system, sole 6-axis EO/IR platform with 4K Ultra HD color and infrared technology. Ideal for law enforcement and defense. Offered with real-time AR overlays to quickly identify streets, weather, and traffic. Automated license plate recognition, 24 megapixel digital photographs, and automated steering and tracking. Thank you to our sponsor, CNC Technologies. CNC Technologies, serving law enforcement, government, and military markets with tailored mission solutions, system training, and live 24/7 support with CNC.live platform. Explore more at cnctechnologies.com.
Thanks for sticking around to hear from our sponsors. Without their support, these conversations would not be possible. We have a really awesome 3-part series coming up in mid-December with 2 pilots who flew for the U.S. Army 160th Night Stalkers. This is an amazing conversation with some really great Americans. One of the pilots we speak with was assigned as an Army Ranger before becoming selected as a pilot. During the interview, he talks about his involvement on the ground during Operation Gothic Serpent, who many of you know as the Black Hawk Down incident. I'm thankful to have had the opportunity to talk with these great men, and I know you all benefit from hearing them speak. Catch you next time. Cheers.
Time to close up the hangar. Thanks for joining us on the Hangar Z Podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicasts.